Federal investigators are trying to determine how an Amtrak train was directed onto the wrong track and into a stationary freight train in South Carolina.
It happened in Casey, South Carolina. That's about 5 miles south of the state's capital, Columbia. The train was traveling from New York to Miami. More than 100 people were injured and 2 Amtrak employees were killed, the engineer and the conductor. Now, Amtrak CEO is blaming a freight train operator for the railroad's latest deadly accident, the 3rd in the last 60 days. CBS News transportation correspondent Kris Van Cleave is in West Columbia, South Carolina. Hi, Kris. Why does Amtrak place the blame on the freight train operator here?
Couple of reasons. These tracks are owned and operated and controlled by CSX, the freight line. The NTSB has found that a track switch was locked into the wrong position, and they believe it's likely that that was what shifted the Amtrak train onto that deadly collision course with the stopped CSX freight train. Because CSX controls the trains, controls the tracks, and thus that switch, Amtrak is pointing the finger, at least at this point, right at CSX.
Kris, the NTSB said the accident may have been avoided with positive train control, which you know a lot about. Can you explain?
Sure. Positive train control is a set of technology that basically is designed to stop a speeding train from going too fast and to prevent 2 trains from colliding. It's a series of sensors that go along the tracks that ties into the signals that are up and down these train lines as well as inside the locomotives. And if it had detected the 2 trains were approaching, it would have, if it was working properly and had been installed, it would have stopped the Amtrak train before it came in contact with the CSX train. It doesn't appear that PTC was active on these tracks, and we saw once again the deadly consequences of not having that technology that, by the way, has been mandated by Congress to be installed on all Class 1 railroads.
Kris, we've asked this question following recent Amtrak derailments, the most recent within the last couple of months. It wasn't in Washington when that derailment happened. Why isn't it in South Carolina?
Well, so rail lines have until the end of this year to install positive train control, and in some circumstances they can even get a waiver to push it to 2020 before they have to have 100% PTC coverage. And this is a point of frustration for the National Transportation Safety Board. You know, Congress passed a law in 2008 that gave railroads 7 years to install this technology, and then as we got close to the deadline in 2015, just months after the deadly Amtrak derailment in Pennsylvania, the rail lines, the rail industry basically said, we'll have to shut down if you don't push this deadline back because we're not compliant. Congress caved and pushed the deadline back to 2018, and now we have seen several more deadly accidents that could have been prevented if PTC had been installed.
So, Kris, then, do you have any insight into how the president's infrastructure plan might impact funding for PTC to be installed by this 2018 deadline?
Well, so the president's infrastructure plan doesn't have a lot of details. There's some belief that the $200 billion of federal money may be redirected from Amtrak and transit projects, but keep in mind that would have to become law and go into effect. So it's unlikely that that would impact any PTC efforts in 2018, since it likely wouldn't become law until next year, if in fact it ever does. But right now, the details of the Trump plan are sketchy at best.
Great context. Thank you, Kris Van Cleave in South Carolina.